Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here, and today we have the new Tier VIII Premium American Heavy Cruiser, the Rochester, in port to review for you guys today. As always, huge shout out to these Patreon supporters for making this review possible. As many of you know, I am not ACC. I do not receive any ships from Wargaming for testing or anything like that. So everything here is funded through the ad revenue from the channel and from the generous donations of these Patreons. So as always, thank you guys for supporting the channel. If you want to support the channel, the best place to do that is Patreon, besides, of course, just watching the videos and the streams. So the Rochester, just looking at it real quick. Again, art department absolutely knocking it out of the park. I mean, look at this image right here. This just in the fjords port. I love the fjords port. Such good lighting, such a high quality, high texture port. And then with a premium ship like this, with a new premium with new high quality textures and such, looks so good in the port. That is my ping. That is not your ping. Please ignore that. So the Rochester, what is this? Well, if you are wondering, this is essentially a Baltimore with a couple of tweaks here and there. So it's now, before you jump on me, yes, it is not a Baltimore class, but you're going to hear me call it like a Baltimore, plays like a Baltimore a lot during this review because it does. I'm not saying it's a Baltimore class. I know it's an Oklahoma City class, but for the purposes of the game, it's pretty much a Baltimore with some tweaks here and there. It's like when I compare the North Carolina to the Alabama, and how they play pretty similar with a couple of tweaks here and there. I'm just saying, gameplay-wise, they're pretty similar. Okay, that out of the way. So, yes, it is an Oregon City class cruiser, which is a slightly tweaked Baltimore. It's kind of a more modern Baltimore, if you will. They redesigned the superstructure. They went to a single stack a single stack smokestack for better arcs with the AA guns and such. For pretty much most of the elements of the ship, the Baltimore and the Rochester are pretty much right there, but there are a few differences and some pretty major ones that we'll get into right now with looking at her stats. So starting off with her armor. If you're wondering, yes, I did play this ship on stream. That's why there's XP on the ship, and I'm recording this right after stream while the thoughts are still fresh in my brain noggin. Alright, so 27mm bow plating, so you can bounce 15-inch there. 27mm upper plating around the side of the ship. Come back to the stern, 27mm here as well. And her citadel is, well, it's like the Baltimore again, above the waterline. Pretty easy to citadel if you get caught out in the open with your flat broadside. It's an American heavy cruiser. If you've shot one before, you know what it feels like to be shot in the Rochester. Turrets, you have a 203mm turret face, 83mm angled side plates, 38mm flat side plate, 76mm turret roof with a 38mm turret rear. Barbettes are 160mm. Hit points, she has 41,900 hit points with 13% torpedo damage reduction. The guns. Alright, so this is where the first difference comes in. The Rochester does have a slightly longer reload than the Baltimore. She has a 12-second reload, and she has a 30-second 180 time on her turrets, 142 meters of maximum dispersion, 14% chance of causing a fire with her shells, maximum H shell damage of 2,800, with 34mm of HE pin, so you can pass the 32mm threshold at higher tier without needing IFHE, which is always good. AP shells, it's got that 203mm super heavy American AP, so yes, it's that AP, it's the good AP. 5,000 maximum shell damage with a range of 15.9 kilometers, which is actually a 0.1 kilometer more than the Baltimore. So you get a whole 100 meters extra in there. AP shell velocity is 762 meters a second, and HE shell velocity is 823 meters a second. So other than the slightly longer reload time or the extra 100 meters range, the guns are pretty much the same as the Baltimore. AA has an A rating of 78. Now, That's decent by Tier 8 standards, but she does also get DFAA in there too. So you can take the pretty decent American AA. If you want to build into it, make it pretty good AA. And then you have the DFAA on top of that. 5.8 kilometer range. For AA guns, you have 20 of these 76mm guns. And then the 5-inch guns are dual purpose, and of course these are her secondary guns as well. I kind of glossed over them, but I mean, it's a cruiser. That's not the Napoli. You're not going to be building into the 12 5-inch guns here for secondaries. Alright, maneuverability, maximum speed of 33 knots, a turning circle radius of 750 meters, and a rotor shift time of 10.5 seconds. Now that is a full 2 seconds more than the Baltimore, so she's a little slower than the Baltimore. Just a little bit slower in terms of turning. Now, concealment. Base detection by range is 11.7 kilometers, which is 400 meters shorter than the Baltimore. So she's a little bit more stealthier than the Baltimore, a little bit more sluggish on the rudder, and a little bit slower on the reload, but it still has the good Baltimore AP, well, the American super heavy AP shells. Now, her equipment, this is where the big change comes in. You get smoke. Get your own smoke screen. So now a lot of you are probably thinking, well, isn't this just a Tier 8 anchorage? And you wouldn't be wrong to think that. Alright, so you get a 30-second action time on the consumable, 104-second dispersion time, and it has a 0.45 kilometer action radius, reloads at 160 seconds, and you get 2 of them base. Now you also get hydro and DFAA at the same time. That's also pretty nice. 2 charges of hydro base, 4 charges of DFAA base. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and slap the build I was running on her tonight on here. Then we'll go through her stats after all that is equipped. Alrighty, so for the commander build, I went with MLG turrets, demolition expert, consumable enhancements, adrenaline rush, heavy AP shells, superintendent, survivability expert, and then concealment. For the modules, I went with main armaments mod 1, damage con 1, aiming systems mod 1, damage con 2, and then concealment mod 1. Now, you can swap this out for the smoke generator mod 1 if you want to buy that in the armory. That increases the consumable action time, but it also decreases the dispersion time as well by 5%. And I guess you could go with engine room protection mod 1 here, or DFAA or hydro if you want to pick those up. Now, you could also go with steering gears mod 1 here to try and rekindle that Baltimore rudder. But I mean, American cruisers typically don't, well, the heavy cruisers typically don't do a lot of dancing. It's a lot of find an island, find some cover, and burn the world down or hold that island. Alright, now for my commander build, of course, you want to make that AP hurt even more, so why not take heavy AP? And because there's no heal, I'm going to head and took survivability expert as well for this ship. Gun feeder, 12 seconds is... I didn't have any problem with having one ammo type loaded that I either just didn't shoot right away or, start loading the other ammo type before, the target disappeared from my sight. But you could go for it, especially with someone like Halsey with that 75% boost to the switch time rather than that 50% boost to the switch time. So you could totally go with that too. I just took Demolition Expert because it's a Tier 8 ship. It's going to get up tiered, which means, yes, you do have the improved pin angles on the 205s, but you're going to be seeing a lot of Tier 10 stuff with a lot of good armor, so you may not be able to make use of it as much as you'd like to, so more chance of setting a fire in my mind's good. Alright, so now we have 45,500 hit points with our build. The guns now have a 132 meter dispersion, which, I mean, on a cruiser, especially one with like a 12-second reload, isn't too big of a deal because you have one crappy salvo, no problem. Let me throw another shell in there. AP damage on the shells are now up to 5,250, and we now have a 17% chance of causing a fire on the ship. We are now down to, I don't want to open it, we want to open up concealment. We're now down to a 9.5 kilometer detection range, which is pretty darn nice, of course, too. And our speed is now up to 34.7 knots with the speed flag equipped. Oh, by the way, the Hydro has a 5-kilometer range on it, so that's pretty nice, and it's active for 121 seconds and reloads in 120 seconds. And of course, now Superintendent, we have 3 smokes, 3 Hydros, and 5 DFAAs. And now the action time is now 37.95 seconds, thanks to the commander's skill that we have on Halsey right here. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and probably show you guys one of the matches I had tonight. I'll meet you guys there in my voiceover review of the Rochester. Hey guys, voiceover Mountbatten here. So, the Rochester. Well, I can tell you one thing. This ship went through the ringer tonight in these matches that I had. If you were out on stream, you got to witness that firsthand for yourself. We had some very rough matches, up tier to tier 10 a lot. And I had 1 or 2 scenarios happen for most of my, actually all of my matches with the Rochester. Scenario 1 was I went to a flank. There was a grand total of 2 DDs and 1 light cruiser there, or something along those lines. 1 DD, 2 cruisers, something with minimal health that my 4 or 5 teammates that I was with could easily just stomp over and go on about our way. And by the time we got to the other side of the map where the rest of the enemy team was, the match was over. Or it was the reverse situation where I was that 1 cruiser with 1 or 2 DDs and we got absolutely just rolled over and the match was over very quickly. So we had a very rough night trying out the Rochester. That being said, her performance was very admirable, especially in my hands. Now, I haven't played a lot of the American heavy cruisers because way back in the day, I got Salem as, I think, my first coal ship ever. So I didn't really ever go up the American heavy cruiser line. Now, I did grind out the light cruiser line, of course, but I never went up the heavy cruiser line, and I never got to the Baltimore, of course. But from what I see here, I mean, it feels like an American heavy cruiser. You're just giving up that radar for that smoke screen. And she's slightly stealthier than the Baltimore. Her guns have a slightly longer reload time, and she's slightly sluggish than the Baltimore. Other than that, it's pretty much a Baltimore, which isn't a bad thing because I do know that Baltimore is considered to be a very good cruiser. Or at least in the American tech line in terms of cruiser performance and such. So, is this ship really, really, really worth it and what it's like to play? So, what it's like to play is, well, of course, depending if you're in a tier 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 game. Because, of course, tier 8 ships can see all of that. When you're top tier, which I never got with this thing, I can't imagine that it's probably very, very, very good. You got that improved AP pin angles, that super heavy American AP. Can probably absolutely dunk all over tier 6 and 7 ships with this thing, even tier 8 ships. I do believe the match you're watching right now does have the clip where I absolutely clapped, I think, ironically, a Baltimore or a Seattle for 22,000 damage with 1 salvo from the Rochester. That's insane for a cruiser, of course. So yes, the AP performance is very much there and is definitely the highlight of this ship. But it's also the highlight of the Baltimore. The real question is, do you want to give up that radar for that smoke? And how does that smoke change gameplay? Well, the smoke does, in theory, allow you to play a little bit closer and a little bit more loose and wild. Because American heavy cruisers are so squishy, as all of you American heavy cruiser players know. You can't show your side or you are going to die. Obviously. As you probably will see here with this Baltimore in a second. The smoke screen allows you to be a little bit more ballsy, be a little bit more flanky, and you can make what was once a no-no zone for the American cruisers into a yes-yes zone because you don't have an island in the middle of the ocean, but you can pop smoke and, let your guns sing. Now, of course, the HE's no slouch either on the ship, but of course with a longer reload time, it's not as burny as the Baltimore, of course, but it could still do it. I had decent success with the HE, and when I was up tiered, which was the entire night, it came in very much handy. many a time. But there were several situations when I was playing the Rochester when I thought, man, I wish I had a radar. When I was either having to push a DD and smoke, which you can do with the Hydro, sure, but now you're pushing a DD and smoke with the Hydro, and you have a slower rudder shift time for the torps they are going to inevitably throw at you. And there's many a time where I didn't have any spotting because either the DDs on my team had died, or the DDs on my team simply didn't go where I went to, so I didn't have any spotting. So a 10-kilometer radar that lasts for around 30 seconds would have been very welcome a lot throughout the night. But the Rochester doesn't have that because you trade that off for the smoke. So that's the big question. Do you want a Baltimore with smoke and no radar? Yes, Rochester is your answer then. Do you want a Baltimore with radar? Well, then just go ahead and get the Baltimore. I mean, I don't really see why you would want the ship if you're happy with your Baltimore. You know, maybe if you are a Baltimore player that wanted a Baltimore with smoke, sure, it can work. The ship does work. The performance is actually pretty darn consistent throughout the night, which I gotta give to the Rochester. I mean, again, we had some very rough matches that were very one-sided either way, and the ship still managed to do around 80-ish to 95,000 damage throughout the night for me. I never broke 100k in this ship because the matches they just didn't last long enough, unfortunately. But the ship could perform, and it performed consistently, which that's a big thing. You know, sure, you can get that once every week, 270,000 damage game in any ship. But can you do that consistently? That's the big question. And the Rochester can do that. So, in terms of performance, it gets pretty good marks. In terms of its usability, it gets pretty good marks there too. Because again, you have a smoke screen. You got that American super heavy AP with the improved pin angles. So, you have all that going for you. But again, when you have a tech line ship that does almost everything that this ship does and has a more unique tool to it, is it really worth it? That's up to you. Now, I do like the idea of it's a slightly different Baltimore with, you know, a different tool set, slightly different guns in terms of the load time and such, and slightly different other configurations too. I think that's pretty cool, but I don't think, you know, this is worth throwing $45 at unless you're just really interested in playing a slightly different Baltimore. So that's what I say about the Rochester. Now, if you're someone that's looking at this and maybe trying to see what the American cruiser line is like, and you might think about picking this ship up, I wouldn't do it. I would play through the line, get to Baltimore, see if you like the Baltimore, and see if you're enjoying the American cruiser line. Then maybe if you do really enjoy the Baltimore and want to switch up your playstyle in it, sure, go ahead and pick up the Rochester. But for just the average Joe out there thinking, oh, maybe this is a nice place to get started in the U.S. cruiser line, it's not. Play the line first and then again make up your mind about getting the Rochester. So guys, in general, I'd say pass on it for now, unless again you're really interested in seeing what a slightly different tooled Baltimore would be like. Other than that, I'd give it a pass. Not really worth the $43. And you know, that's kind of a double-edged sword for me because it's not really unique enough to reach that $43 level, but it's still interesting enough and enough of a switch up from the Baltimore to almost be worth it in terms of, again, trying out a different way of playing a Baltimore. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's worth it, again, unless you're really interested in a switched up Baltimore. So guys, let me know what you guys think about this in the comments down below. If you picked up the Rochester, let me know how you've been doing it. Or again, I had a very rough night when I was filming this review and doing this review for the Rochester. But again, very solid performance out of her. Very consistent performance out of her. Gotta give that to the ship. But again, overall, don't think it's worth it unless, again, you're very interested in a smoky Baltimore. So guys, hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. One way to 30,000 subs, and I cannot thank you guys enough for that. Hope you're all having a wonderful weekend. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.